David Rice is a teenager living a normal life in a small rural town. He talks to Millie, a classmate he's attracted to, and gives her a snow globe as a gift. Millie accepts it wholeheartedly, but another classmate, Mark, takes it away, teasing David. Mark then throws the snow globe onto a frozen lake. Ignoring Millie's warnings, David goes after it. As he reaches for the snow globe, the ice breaks and he falls in. Millie rushes to help, but David is trapped beneath the ice. The current pulls him away, and escape seems impossible until he suddenly finds himself in the middle of a public library. Disoriented and in shock, David tries to leave without drawing attention. He heads home, where his father, William, notices he's late. David lives alone with his father, as his mother left when he was a child. William demands to know where David has been, but he stays silent. Frustrated, William chases him into his room. Just as William bursts in, David vanishes and reappears in the library. Realizing he has a unique ability, David sees it as an opportunity for a better life. He gathers his savings and moves to a big city. Determined to understand his powers, he practices teleporting at a park. He flips through a tourist magazine, testing his ability to travel to famous landmarks. When he sees a picture of the Empire State Building, he suddenly remembers being there with his mother, Mary. Objects in his room start floating, and in an instant, he teleports to the Empire State Building. He soon discovers he can only teleport to places he's seen before. With no money, David decides to use his power to rob a bank. He enters a bank, asks to use the restroom, and memorizes the vault's layout. That night, he teleports inside, taking as much cash as he can carry, making multiple trips. The next day, an investigation begins. Roland Cox arrives, claiming to be with the government. He reviews security footage and suspects the crime was committed by someone with teleportation abilities. Years later, David now lives in a luxurious New York penthouse. His apartment is filled with souvenirs from around the world, and he has a secret room stocked with different currencies. Living extravagantly, he teleports wherever he pleases, surfing in Fiji, dining atop the Sphinx, and even meeting women in London. However, in a remote jungle, another teleporter is captured by Roland, who sees jumpers as abominations that must be exterminated. Roland stabs the man, killing him, and then receives a tip about the bank robbery. David returns to his apartment, only to find Roland waiting for him. Roland accuses him of the theft, but makes it clear he's not with the police. When David demands he leave, Roland attacks him with an electrified baton. David tries to teleport away, but is tethered by a cable that prevents him from escaping. Struggling, he teleports into his hidden room and cuts the cable before fleeing with a bag of cash. He reappears in his childhood home, where his father is stunned to see him. William, still haunted by David's disappearance, pleads with him to stay. David reassures him that he's not crazy, then vanishes again. The next day, David tracks down Millie at a local bar. He runs into his old bully, Mark, and they get into a fight. To get revenge, David teleports Mark inside a bank vault and leaves him there. David reconnects with Millie, telling her he now works in banking. When she shares her dream of traveling the world, he invites her on a trip to Rome. Excited, she agrees, unaware that Griffin, another jumper, is watching them. In Rome, they explore the city while Roland interrogates Mark, learning about Millie's connection to David. Meanwhile, David and Millie grow closer, sharing a romantic evening. Later, David sneaks her into the Colosseum, where he runs into Griffin. Griffin reveals himself as another jumper and warns David about the Paladins, a group dedicated to hunting jumpers. Before David can fully grasp the danger, Paladins ambush them. A fight breaks out, and as David tries to escape, an electrified cable snags him. David's teleporting ability is disabled again. Griffin steps in, quickly overpowering the two Paladins. After taking them down, he tells David that he's been killing Paladins for years, then teleports away to his secret lair. David notices a residue from Griffin's jump, called a jump scar, and follows him. Griffin warns him to stay away, so David returns to Millie. David leads Millie out of the Colosseum, but she demands an explanation. Before he can respond, the police arrive and arrest him for trespassing. At the station, David is questioned but insists he's just a tourist who broke the rules and is sorry. The officers leave, telling him to wait for the magistrate from the U.S. Embassy. As he waits, a woman enters, his mother, Mary. She warns David that he is only 30 seconds before more Paladins arrive, then hands him a key to his handcuffs. Mary rushes out, and David chases after her but loses sight of her. He then meets back up with Millie, and they head to the airport. There, David tells Millie they need to separate. Disappointed, she boards her flight alone. Meanwhile, Roland arrives at William's house, posing as an IRS agent. William is uncooperative, telling Roland he hasn't seen David in 8 years. He also mentions that Mary left when David was 5. When William asks Roland to leave, Roland refuses. David teleports to Griffin's hideout and finds walls covered with pictures and information on paladins worldwide. He asks why the paladins are hunting jumpers. Griffin explains that the war has been going on since the Dark Ages. The paladins, religious fanatics, believe teleportation is a power that should belong only to God. Griffin warns that they won't hesitate to kill anyone to get to David. Realizing Millie and his father could be in danger, David teleports home and finds William unconscious on the floor. He rushes him to a hospital, where doctors immediately help. David returns to Griffin's hideout, determined to take down Roland. Griffin dismisses the idea, saying he's tracked Roland for over 10 years, but only ended up with more scars. David insists they can work together, but Griffin refuses and teleports to China. David follows, still trying to convince him. Eventually, Griffin agrees when David reveals he knows where Roland might strike next Millie. They split up. David goes to get Millie, while Griffin returns to his hideout to prepare. David arrives at Millie's apartment. Surprised to see him again, Millie tells him she wants nothing to do with him. As she demands he leave, David hears Roland and his men approaching. With no other choice, he reveals his powers to her. Stunned, Millie panics and tries to run, but David grabs her and teleports them both to Griffin's hideout. Roland and the paladins enter Millie's apartment and find it empty, but Roland spots a jump scar. They set up a device beneath it, activating a portal. They're trying to reopen the jump scar to follow David. David meets with Griffin, but Griffin is furious to see Millie there. He warns David about the Paladin's machine, saying bringing Millie to the hideout will only lead them straight to them. Checking the jump scar, they see it growing larger. Seconds later, Roland appears. David and Griffin hide, but as David crouches, he notices a picture of Mary on Griffin's wall of known paladins. Before he can react, an electrified cable strikes him, pinning him to the wall. Griffin rushes in with a flamethrower and a fight breaks out. Using his teleporting abilities, Griffin gains the upper hand, but Roland fights back with paladin technology. Griffin punches Roland out of the hideout, then teleports away, returning with a speeding bus aimed straight at Roland. Roland barely dodges it in time. Meanwhile, Millie finds David stuck to the wall and tries to free him, but Roland appears, ready to kill her. Frozen in fear, she watches as Griffin returns, blasting Roland into the jump scar with his flamethrower. Griffin jumps in after him. The fight continues back in Millie's apartment. At the hideout, Millie finally frees David but insists she wants to go home. She doesn't want any part of this. Left with no choice, David agrees. As he prepares to take her back, Griffin reappears, holding the Paladin's jump scar opener. But before they can leave, the Paladins send a cable through the jump scar, capturing Millie and pulling her back into the apartment. David wants to rescue Millie, but Griffin sets up a bomb. Confused, David protests, but Griffin insists this is their chance to end the Paladins once and for all. He plans to teleport into the apartment with a bomb. David refuses and teleports away with it. Griffin chases after him, and they teleport through various locations: Egypt, San Francisco, New York, fighting for the bomb's detonator. They land in a war-torn country, where Griffin finally gains control of the detonator. But he doesn't notice a falling pylon. David quickly teleports Griffin into it, allowing the electricity to trap him. Griffin warns David that he won't stand a chance against 5 paladins, but David is determined to save Millie. Back at the apartment, David reaches Millie but is immediately struck by 5 electrified cables. The paladins anchor him to the apartment, but David keeps focusing on teleporting. The entire building starts to shake. With the wires connecting him to the apartment, every teleport attempt pulls the entire structure with him. He grunts, struggling, as the walls crack and jolt. Then, with one final push, he teleports the entire apartment to the lake where he first discovered his abilities. Some paladins are knocked unconscious, others drown. With another jump, he teleports the apartment back to the library. David regains consciousness and sees Roland still alive. Without hesitation, he teleports Roland and abandons him in the middle of the Grand Canyon. Sometime later, David tracks down his mother. A young girl answers the door, Mary's daughter. David and Mary finally talk. She reveals that she's a paladin. When David first teleported at age 5, she made the painful decision to leave him to protect him from the other paladins. Now reunited, David asks what happens next. Mary simply says, "I'll give you a head start." David returns to Millie, who's waiting for him outside. They smile at each other, hold hands, and teleport away. So that's it. Hope you enjoy the story. Subscribe and press the bell icon for more videos.